Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for the Will and Dave Show. Quick little content advisory. Today, we're going to be talking about COVID and its impact on the job market, kind of as it's winding down, as well as a couple of other related topics. But shouldn't be anything too crazy. Just sociopolitical stuff. Really lighthearted. Just wanted you to be aware.
Welcome to the Will and Dave Show.
Oh, you're rocking out there, Will.
I was praising.
Oh,
Yeah,
Is
that
that
was
what it
my worship hand, Dave.
is that what it was?
Everyone knows that if you reach high, God hears you better.
That's one way of putting it, I guess. So we were talking before the show, and you're saying, should I wear my glasses or should I not wear my glasses? And I had to remind myself that I don't have a choice. It sucks getting old.
Yeah, I mean, I only have mine for like the screen reflection, so I wear them when I'm sitting at the computer. But for this, I'm not really looking at my computer. I look at a camera now, so
Right.
I really don't need them. It's more of a stylistic choice.
And because I'm the guy behind the computer who produces it, I have to look at the screen. So I have to read.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't care either. But so how's your week been?
Busy, very busy.
Are you
I got
building lots and lots of trusses?
Yes, building lots of trusses. I finished my probationary period there. I'll be staying on permanently, and I'm very happy about that.
My son's on probation.
I was on probation. I'm done now.
Oh, okay. Does that mean you're back in jail?
I'm a big boy. No, I'm just a full time employee now. There's no more.
Okay. It's that
Or
kind of
I
probation.
was full time, but now I'm permanent.
Oh, so you're not out on probation. You're actually
I'm out of probation.
out of. Oh, okay. I see. I got that all wrong. I thought you were
Small Freudian
out
slip on my part.
on probation.
No, I'm not that edgy.
There we go. Well, we should do this before we get much further.
Yes, got to pay some bills. If you like the podcast and you'd like to support us, you can go to www.buymeacoffee.com/Will and Dave Show, where for the price of a admittedly fancy cup of coffee, you can help support us and what we do here. Every little bit helps.
Every little bit. And speaking of money, why don't we thank our sponsor?
Hi, I'm Susan. I think that in all the world, there's nothing quite like the coziness of a handmade quilt. So I'm on a mission to spread that love as far and wide as I can. If you're a quilt maker, I offer long arm quilting services and I accept work from anywhere in North America. If you already know how to make quilts and you want to learn how to machine quilt them yourself, I have a number of classes and lots of tutorials available that can help you with that. And if you don't want to do any of those processes, you just want to go straight to having the quilt with no delay, I do have a number of fully completed quilts available for sale as well. So details on all of those things can be found on my website, www.stitchedbysusan.com. Well, I've got to get back to quilting, so I'm going to let you get back to the Will and Dave Show. Enjoy.
That was the wonderful Stitched by Susan,
Yes.
who I had the pleasure of spending the day with on the road today. We went to a quilt museum in Idaho. Had
Oh, wow.
an awesome day. You can hear all about it in a few weeks on her podcast.
Measure twice, cut once.
That is the name of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
He's
I
smooth.
always worry that I'm going to get the adage wrong and screw it all up.
And say measure once, cut twice.
Yeah.
That would be the story of my life.
That makes two of us.
It's always a miracle how you cut it twice and it's always shorter. Like, what's with that? I can never get it the right length.
Just keep cutting till it fits.
There we go. So we it was a bit of a day. It was about a 2-hour drive, and we went and recorded an interview for her podcast.
Oh, nice.
It was on location, which was sort of fun. And we began the weekend not quite so much fun because on Friday morning, I walked in the kitchen and Susan said, "Hey, we're using my computer." And I said, "No." She said, "Well, it won't turn on."
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They just crap out.
It died a horrible death. I did everything I know to do. I called Apple. They couldn't help us. So I went on.
Apple can't help anyone.
So I went on on Facebook Marketplace last night, and I bought a used computer for Susan. So
There you go.
I was up till the wee hours of the morning moving everything over so we could record her interview today because we needed her laptop to do it.
Right.
That was my weekend.
Happy to hear it worked out for you. My
It
weekend
did.
involved going to a farmer's market and buying a lot of cinnamon buns and then eating all of them before I got home.
So you do realize that if you go to a farmer's market and you buy a lot of cinnamon buns, that you will look like me.
I mean, I only do it now and then, and I exercise a lot. So
Okay. So you're saying that you won't look like me if you eat a lot of cinnamon buns?
I may end up looking like you anyways, just due to genetics. I may not have a choice in the matter, but I think the cinnamon buns are the least of my worries.
And I apologize for that in advance for those
Thank
genes.
you. You know what? To this day, I still think back. I remember years ago, I while I was shaving once, I had to shave for theater. I couldn't have a beard. And while I was in the process of shaving, I was like, I'm going to give myself a goatee just to see what it looks like because you used to rock the goatee all the time. Never again. Never again. I ended up looking just like you, but with like a younger filter on or something like that. Like something you would find on Snapchat. It was terrifying. I mean, you look fine. It's just,
So did you have
it's
a
like
goatee in
uncanny.
this picture, Will?
No, I had a beard for that
You
show.
had a beard for that show?
Yeah. It wasn't
What
as
show was that, by the
It
way?
wasn't as luxurious as this one is. That was Outlaw by, I'm trying to remember the guy's name, the writer. He's a Canadian playwright. Norm Foster.
We went to that show. It was awesome.
It was a very fun show. I liked it a lot. Playing a villain is so much fun.
You make a great bad guy. So before we get into the show and the topics that we have today, I would like to encourage those watching, say hello in the comments. We like to interact with you. And even more than that, if you go to our website at www.thewillanddaveshow.com, you can write in a question. It's right in the upper right. Have a link for submit your question or your comment, and we will use it on air. You can do it as a video, in which we will play it on air and we'll laugh at you hysterically, maybe. Right?
You never know.
You never know. We will if you do not use the King's English. We will. Yes, we will mock your grammar.
We understand the irony as we stumble over ourselves regularly while talking on the show. We get the irony. We're just leaning into it.
We're leaning into it. Hey, hi from number one fan.
Hey.
Oh, it's really big number one fan. Let's just make that normal size. There we go. Hi from Tim.
Hi, Tim.
So we want to highlight a few things. We're going to do this more often now, as it seemed as though we were getting into the tit for tat and the liberal and conservative and the old and the young, and never really going over the reason we have the show. And the reason, and I'll do it a real overview, and you can go into it a little bit more, is it's not about the topics, as neither of us are experts in the topics. If you want to look at fraud, or you want to look at vaccines or COVID or business, what we have is opinions.
Yeah.
And they often aren't even really good opinions, but
Rarely even.
At the end of the day, there are opinions and they're different, and we have to get along with each other with a difference of opinion.
Yeah. It's less about the end result and more about the process, I think. It's about how we can converse about these topics that in many, many cases we both feel very passionately about, and usually in opposing directions. But at the end of the day, we still talk about it respectfully, and we still love each other at the end of it most of the time.
If you go to our YouTube channel, it says on the YouTube channel our opening, the teaser clip
Yeah.
is one of the times when we're sitting there and we realize that we've gone through this topic and we hadn't argued about it. It's like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
It happens more often than we'd like, even, because us bumping heads together is it's good spicy content.
Yeah.
But more often than not, we find common ground while we're working our way through these topics and sharing our opinions on them.
Which is the point of the show.
Yeah,
Is looking for common ground.
I like to think it has less to do with the fact that we're related, we got to get along, and more to do with the fact that both of us talk about it and talk about each other and each other's opinions respectfully most of the time.
Well, and I
Most of the time.
think that everybody knows that the fact that we're related most certainly does not mean we have to get along. Fights in families are pretty notorious.
Yeah, and ours is no different. But when it comes to
right.
politics, I think we separate our passions into, well, not separate them, but we understand that passions run high on these topics, and so we temper them.
Yes.
When discussing them with each other, because it doesn't do any good to just let a metaphorical wildfire rage through the conversation, because it's not constructive. It's just fire.
Right. So earlier this week, I posted a video by Jim Daneker, and it's a great video of a song by Phil Collins years ago, but it outlines this whole idea of confusion in society and confusion in politics, confusion with vaccines, etc. And in my comment, I said, you really need to go out and have a coffee with somebody that you don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Just have a coffee. You pay for the coffee and listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then leave. Don't argue and don't present an opinion and don't have your say at the end and say, yes, but. Just have a coffee with somebody. You pay for the coffee and walk away and think about it. And I think the world would be way better off.
I think you're right.
But so that's the foundation for the show. And I'll have more on that maybe next week, but maybe later on this week, maybe later on in the show.
We also want to kind of, we want to keep reiterating that, because we ourselves, who are making the show and made the show for that purpose, still kind of started to slide into just debating the issues. And then the purpose of the show isn't just to debate them; it's to enjoy the process.
As we don't know enough about the issues to be a qualified debater.
Yeah, that's why we try to have people on to talk about the really hairy ones, is because we're fully aware that we are unqualified and not even remotely close to competent enough to fully flesh those out.
That's correct. So on the agenda tonight, the first one that was not on the thumbnail, but it was the first one on the list, is in the state of Washington, if you get a vaccine, you can get a free joint.
Amen, brother.
At almost anywhere in the U.S., if you get a vaccine, you can get a free case of beer.
Here.
In many states in the U.S., if you get a vaccine, you can go get a free pizza from Pizza Hut, if I remember correctly.
Tough luck.
In many countries and in many states in the U.S. and in Canada, provinces, if you get the vaccine, you are entered in the drawing for a lottery of up to $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on one moment.
Oh, he's going for it. He's going for it. Yeah.
Okay, I can't wear my headphones with my tinfoil hat. Okay. So there are a fair number of people. Oh, you can't see the antennae there. Oh, okay, there we go. Got to get the antennae out. So there's a fair number of folks who look at that and say, why does the government have to incentivize people to take a vaccine?
See, it's so interesting to me, because I see lots of posts online about that, about why does the government have to incentivize us? That's pretty sus. And it's funny because people who are getting the vaccine are asking the exact same question, just with a different spin. We're like, why does it require, like, why do we have to incentivize people to get the vaccine? I find the most interesting part to be how many people are taking the incentive. That's the part that blows my mind. Like, vaccination rates in the states that had the $1 million draw were up like 60 something percent. It was insane. If that's all it took, like,
Well, the odds are pretty good. Seriously, when you think about it, odds are pretty good you're going to win $1 million.
mhm. But I just mean, like, everyone who's like, I don't know, man, that's pretty vaccine that fast. That's whew. We give you a lottery ticket. Oh, I'm in. Yep. Pump that stuff right in. Just give me a garden hose, man. It was real easy to win people over, or a single doob, like really one joint. That's all it took to get some people to get their vaccine. One pizza, one case of beer.
So
That's a low bar to clear.
So there are some hurdles in the state of Washington, as they did offer a free joint
Mm-hmm.
if you got the vaccine, and there was a whole bunch of hooks in that you had to go somewhere, you had to do it at the location, and it had to be a joint, on the spot. It couldn't be a credit for a joint in the future. There was a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of caveats there. But so I'm going to be, in the interest of full disclosure, I have not had the vaccine yet. We are looking at getting the vaccine because we have to travel to Canada, and it looks like that's going to be the only way they're going to let us into the country is if we have a vaccine. And it's been so I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and I have said this on the show before. It's not that I'm anti-vaccines. All of our kids, you and the others, were all vaccinated, and we believe in vaccines. For me, I am one of those that wonders why we have to be incentivized so highly. Why it's such a huge deal. And the problem that we have, and I'm going to say we loosely, as I'm not going to speak for all of us on the side who questions, but there are so many areas in which we have, on the government side, there have been missteps. There have been like outright lies for manipulation of information, and they've admitted, they said, well, it's for your own good. I was reading a quote by your wonderful Prime Minister, who said that he was not going to open up the borders, the U.S., as they have a duty to the people, and they are there to do what is best for the people. Since when is the government's role to do what is the best for the people and not what the people ask them to do or vote them in to do? This whole idea that, hey, I'm daddy and I know best. It didn't work when you were 13. It doesn't work when you're 30 something.
I get the metaphor, but like when I was like 13, it was like, don't trying to think of an example. Don't stick a fork in a light socket. That's more infantile. But the idea, don't stick a fork in a light. And I did it, and I got shocked, and now I don't do it. It's not quite an apples to apples comparison, because we're not talking sticking a fork in a socket and having a bad time. We're talking, pandemic. We're talking lives.
Yes. And
it's something that I struggle with a lot too, because on one hand, I read and love books like Orwell's, what was it, 1986? 1886? 1986?
1984.
1984. Thank you. Wow. Brain fart. I love the book. And so the idea, the concept of, Big Brother and the government overreaching and that is always ever present in the back of my head. But at the same time, it's another part of me that's like, well, people are obviously not doing the right thing of their own accord for a variety of reasons. I think the biggest just being mass spread of misinformation. But for whatever reason, they're not doing it. And so it's up in the air. On one hand, I want government to do it because people aren't doing it themselves. But on the other hand, I don't want to have to rely on government to do that. I don't want government to have that kind of overwatch or oversight.
Here's an interesting comment from Tim that in Canada, it's illegal for a retailer to give, distribute, or have a lottery for liquor or alcohol or tobacco products. And I don't know that anybody in Canada has offered the beer or...
Yeah, I think Canada, it's just money.
I think it's cash. And Brad, our number 2 fan, likes my hat.
I don't have a tinfoil hat, unfortunately. Maybe I should get one for future episodes so we can alternate our tinfoil hats.
And he also wants you to pretend to be 13 and have me talk to you.
Let's not do that. Those conversations were not fun for anyone involved.
So it's something that when you look at, and I don't want to get into the issues of the vaccine for right or wrong, because that's not really the point of this, but the role of government to say, hey, I'm going to incentivize you with your money, taxpayer dollars, and give you a lottery to go and get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems just a little bit odd to me.
It is odd. I will definitely take it over the alternative, which is them enforcing it. Anything that they can do that is not enforcement, I'm happy. Any level of coercion that is not enforcement, I will be happier with. Emphasis on the still not entirely happy, but
right.
Happier.
Oh yes, I forgot about free Krispy Kreme donuts with COVID shot.
Okay, so I have a lot of unpopular opinions on this podcast, especially because I think a larger portion of our viewer base is,
I'm going to make that one large so people can read that. Yeah. That's important right there.
But I'm gonna come at you here with a really hot take that I'm gonna alienate some people with this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Krispy Kreme's not that good. Like they're good, but they're not great. They're just
better than Tim Hortons.
Better than Tim Hortons. If that's, what, I want that to be Krispy Kreme's new tagline.
Better than Tim Hortons.
Better than those Canadian guys. Better than that hockey players chain that's now owned by Americans. We're ever so slightly better than them. So, yeah.
Yes, I forgot about the Krispy Kreme incentive. That's right too. That was a while ago, and that was fairly big actually. A lot of people were taking them up on it, but and I agree with you a little bit that they're
Krispy
not
Kremes
the best
aren't that
donut.
good?
Yeah, they're not the best donut in the world, but they're so for those of you in Canada who don't know, on the outside of a Krispy Kreme store, there's a red light. And if the red light is on, they're fresh out of the oil, and they are very good when they're fresh out of the oil. If the red light is not on, they're not as good. But so you look for the red light.
I think that applies to any baked good. If it's fresh out of the oven, like a fresh strudel or something like that, yes. But it's a slightly above average mass produced donut. That's what a Krispy Kreme is. I alienated number 1 fan. This is it. I'm being canceled over Krispy Kremes.
That's right. It's a but think about the range of incentives. From beer to joints to coin to donuts to money, all to get a vaccination.
They're pandering to the right audience. I mean, beer, pizza, joints, and money they're looking for the people who couldn't be bothered to go get a vaccine, and they're trying to convince them to do so.
So let me ask you, are you vaccinated?
I would be. I
But
currently, because I've moved provinces, I could not quite get vaccinated in Ontario before I left because I wasn't eligible. I am eligible now in BC, but I need to get my BC medical card first,
gotcha.
which is a pretty simple process. I just go into a courthouse and do that. So as
Right.
soon as I can do that, there's literally walk-in clinics to get my first shot here. I don't even necessarily need an appointment.
I'm going
And
to
I
give
will
you a
be.
hint. In Fort St. John, there are drive-in clinics. You,
It's closed this week. It may
you
open
stick
again.
your arm out the window and they jab a needle in it.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. I love it.
Oh,
Can't wait.
gosh.
I mean, I hate needles, but so I just can't wait to get it over with.
I'm going to tell I have a story about you kids. You guys used to love needles. I don't know what changed with you, Will, but when you kids were young, you would ask to go to the health nurse or the health
Oh,
clinic
yeah.
and get your vaccination.
Yeah, because we
You
got
all loved it.
cute Band-Aids and lollipops.
Yeah.
I was also easy to convince to get a shot. Like I'm not wagging a finger, people. I did it for a lollipop and a cute Band-Aid. Like case of beer is a definite upgrade on that. Never liked the needles. There's something about the feeling of the needle going in that just makes my skin crawl, and I'm not a fan. It's not like I'm gonna throw up or anything, but it's very uncomfortable. You know?
Yeah. Okay, I have to stop you. If we're going to get after the grammar people,
Uncomf.
uncomf, and there is this thing that's in society now that we do half words.
Yes, we do.
Don't.
Sus.
Yeah, sus.
That's pretty sus.
Like, just say the whole bleeding word. Like, come on already. We're not
That's
that
pretty
lazy.
suspicious.
That's right.
Makes me mildly uncomfortable.
That's right. It does. Makes me
not-
madly uncomfortable when I hear half words. I'm gonna start to give half answers. You would like candy, little boy? Well, maybe if, and that's where I'll end. You're gonna use half words?
You picked like the creepiest possible example for that.
Sorry, it was the first thing that came to mind.
Oh my god.
Well, I wasn't sticking my hand out the window at the schoolyard. That wasn't where I was doing it. So, do we want to tackle Brad's comment about pot stores and casinos open, but restaurants were closed, or is that another topic for another day?
I mean, I'll hit it hard and fast.
Okay.
Pot stores are open for the same reason beer stores are open, because people would. It's just to keep the population happy and content while they're stuck at home. Casinos being open, I think, is absolute. It's a crock. I see no viable reason to keep casinos open when restaurants are closed at all. That seems like lunacy to me. Just pure and simple.
Were they in Canada?
In Canada, they weren't, as far as I know.
Okay.
I couldn't say for sure. In BC and Ontario, they were all closed. They've been closed since the beginning of the pandemic. They haven't even had the tiniest opportunity to open up.
Right. It's interesting. Canada has been much more. What's the word I want? More aggressive on the closings and the lockdowns
Mhm.
than the U.S. Much
And
more
I think-
aggressive.
Yeah, I think we've had less of the issues with big chains being able to operate like just willy-nilly while small stores are getting screwed. I mean, they're still getting screwed a bit. It's not like small stores aren't getting screwed. It's just I think
Right.
that it's to a lesser extent.
Right.
Because Costco here, their regulations were for the longest time exceedingly tight, and the big stores were the stores that
As
had
in
to
what?
rope. As in, like, number of people that were allowed in the store. For a while, there were literally officers on site to make sure that Costco was following through. Not like in a you have to kind of way, but more just oversight to make sure they were managing it and people
Right.
weren't, causing a ruckus. I mean, our malls had to hire extra security in Peterborough so that they could just let X number of people in at a time.
Mhm.
So big chain stores weren't getting a lot of special treatment. I mean, the Walmarts and the Costco's were the people who had to cordon off aisles that were non-essential. Small
Right.
stores, they weren't given that same expectation because they're already small. They
Right.
were just told X number of people, and that's that.
Right. It was interesting. Early on here, it was like that, and there were numbers who were allowed in stores.
Mhm.
That went it went by the wayside really quick. It didn't last for very long, and they let that
Yeah.
one go because it was hard to enforce. And you have a business who already is under the gun,
Yeah,
and then they have to hire security. They have to do all the extra things. And
exactly.
it just was unmanageable for a lot of small business. And
Hmm.
Walmart, of course, it can afford to hire a lady at each door with an iPad
Yeah,
and
who can
count how
keep
many
count.
people are going in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that it didn't last long here, but
Hmm. So, related note, this
yes.
this is purely a gripe. This is a me problem, and it drives me nuts. In the town that I'm in now, Fort St. John, we have, in the Walmart, like every other major store, there's the arrows pointing what direction you're supposed to walk and everything. And me and a friend were having a topic. We were having a conversation while we're walking through Walmart, talking about whether or not we should follow the arrows. And I'm like, well, yeah, if the arrows go this way, I'll generally go that way. But if I'm in a store like this one where everyone ignores the arrows, then what's the point? It's all on me to socially distance. I can't rely on the arrows to help me avoid bumping into people. But the part that drives me nuts about that whole situation, it I don't know what it is about me. It makes my brain hurt. They put the arrows on the wrong side of the aisle. The up the aisle arrow is on the left. The down the aisle arrow is on the right. And I have to. It's like driving on the wrong side of the road, and it's wrong. What idiot? What person was paid to go do that? I mean, I'm sure it's a minimum wage worker, and he was just putting stickers down, and it's a simple
It's a
mistake. But
Walmart
still,
employee, yes.
it's a Walmart employee, so I'm not expecting a lot. But it makes me so angry every time I walk into our Walmart here and I see that, and I'm like, ah,
So it
fix
makes
it.
me angry for a whole nother reason that I purposely walk the opposite way of the arrows.
Well, now you're just mean.
No,
You're a
I
big
don't
meanie.
like
I'm
to
going
be.
to report you to Big Brother.
Yeah, I'm sure I've already been reported. So this isn't this sort of it goes along with what we said earlier in the show with your government in Canada who said, "Hey, we know what's best for you." This is an interesting angle on that, as
It is.
of course, I say you're here to serve me, not the other way around. And yet, it's been a long time since the government of either of our countries served the people.
On that, we can agree.
It
I agree that it's not our job to serve government. I think that to a degree, uh, uh, listening to the government as a regulatory body or as a source of guidance, maybe, but that's not serving it as much as it's respecting it, I think. But I do agree that government's meant to serve the people, not vice versa.
it's really interesting what that means to serve.
Mm-hmm.
As usually, it means you do the will of or the bidding of the other person. So in a restaurant, if you're my
Right.
server, you're serving me. So you are the one who brings me food. You bring me the drinks. I pay you the money that I owe you at the end of the meal. You are the person who serves me. You're there for my benefit.
Mm-hmm.
You also are there to say, no, that is not on the menu, or no, I don't allow substitutions. And you also are there to lay the ground rules for the relationship. The
Yes.
server is,
Mm-hmm.
not the served.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I also have the option of going to another restaurant if you don't do substitutions, and you don't have that option usually in
Denmark, here I
countries.
come.
Yeah.
I'm
Good
done
luck
with this
that.
place.
Yeah. It's a different, so analogies over time will break down, obviously, if you push them too
Yeah.
far. But
I think it's a good analogy, though.
it is not only, and this is where I think we will agree a little bit more, the role of government is to serve, although to serve does not mean you do the whim of every person you serve.
Mm-hmm.
Or it would go crazy in doing your whim and my whim. And it doesn't work that well. So, well, let's move on to the last half of the show, Will, which is another topic, which has been a bee under your bonnet for a little while.
Oh boy.
The
Which one's this?
The fraud.
Oh yeah.
With COVID relief. It's been rampant in the US.
Mm-hmm.
It's rampant in Canada, although it's hard to find evidence of, and I'm not sure exactly why that is.
I think it's largely because Canada just kind of threw caution to the wind with it. If you applied, you got it.
Yeah. It was interesting. I'm going to open up a screen here, Will. This is... So this is a while ago. This is an article from June of last year. So Canada was offering the CERB and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the governments were instructed to ignore the most of the cases of cheating.
Yes. From my understanding, it was kind of a blanket instruction, which is don't bother checking, just
hand money
out. Funds. Hand money out. It was basically, it wasn't worth wasting time checking because they needed to get the money out stat. And so they just said, get the money out. Don't, just do it.
So how do you hope that somebody's not going to take advantage of that?
You don't. You know they're going to. There's no way that any body that gave that instruction didn't know that it was going to get abused into the dirt. Like, they had to know that was going to happen. And they weighed the time it would take to sift through all the applications versus getting the money out to their constituency, and they took the getting the money out option.
It's interesting in this article, and I can't remember where it was. The government did not require a social insurance number or any income verification for CERB or for the EI claims early on in the pandemic.
Don't know about that. I know that
It's true. I was looking for it.
I see. I'm not sure about the context because I know that when my ex, when she was applying for CERB, because she did early on in the pandemic, well, she applied for unemployment, which had basically morphed into CERB, and so they gave her CERB at about the same rate, but she had to go through the whole process of it. Like, she had, proof. She had to get proof from her previous job, and that was all required for her to access CERB. So I'm not sure where the differentiation lie when the rules changed or anything like that.
Here's the joy of what happens at the federal level is you are defrauded, and the government says, yeah, you have to pay the tax on income anyways, even though, you have to wait to prove it, as you are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, which I'm not a fan of.
It drives me crazy. So here's another angle, and this one is just for Tim because I know he would appreciate this. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit on this one. This is from an organization. It's called the Magazine of Socialist Ideas in Action. And they're saying there was no fraud.
I'm saying they're stupid.
The labeling of these overpayments as fraud willfully distorts the issue. And then you go further down and they say, where was it here? Here. The honest mistakes are being painted as fraud, and to counteract this fraud, the government has started, in their own words, a snitch line to report people have committed fraud. Why don't we go into a court of law and say, oh, Your Honor, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to rob that store. It's an honest mistake. I mean, and see how far that gets you.
I know some people that applied for, say, one government service, and the government was like, oh, and CERB, and sent them CERB money on top of it.
Yes.
Some people kept it. Some people held on to it to return. Some people, various
Yes.
responses. That kind of thing happened. And so that, yeah, honest mistake, or even just an honest nothing. It just happened.
Right.
But as you say, if someone had defrauded them, they can't go into a court of law and be like, oopsies.
But it surprises me, and I'm really surprised at Canada. And again, I spent a bit of time this afternoon. I was looking into these issues in Canada for fraud and whatnot. They were instructed not to look for fraud. They were instructed not to prosecute it.
Because I don't know what it's like all over Canada. Where I was in Canada, government services were already backed up pre-pandemic. Like just doing simple stuff like insuring your car involved massive lines, or doing your taxes involved waiting much longer than I remember it ever being here on the West Coast. And so CERB would have overloaded that system so drastically that they just said, just
have the money.
Caution to the wind. Yeah, caution to the wind. Just throw it out there. Yeah.
Worry about it later.
Yeah, basically is what they said, is worry about it later maybe. We'll see if they worry about it. Maybe they're hoping that money will just go rolled back into the economy, and they're just writing it off as a. I would like to think that they accounted for that, but who knows? It's the government.
So I had a whole bunch of articles, and I'm not going to show them because we'd be here all night, of the number of people in the U.S., the hundreds and hundreds of million. It's actually in the billions of dollars in the U.S. who are defrauded. And these are the ones that they know about and have either indicted or charged. And if there's that many, there's going to be more that they haven't caught.
Yeah. And the thing that surprised me about it was how much of it was organized fraud, as opposed to like Jim Bob's like, hey, I can get me a check from, I can get me some Biden bucks. And so he goes and gets him some Biden bucks by signing up for that. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying I'm surprised at how much was organized. Like apparently a lot of organized crime rings, whether it be mobsters or mafiosos, or I don't know what it's called in the States now, gangs, whatever. I'm actively as groups.
For an article, I was looking at this one this afternoon. I'm just looking for the one. Made 90 applications for PPP money in the U.S. 42 of them were funded to the amount of $17 million. 90 applications. This is not an accidental. This is fraud. And sure, the IRS is going to go after them, and the IRS may get it back. I don't even know where to go with this. I mean, I think it pisses us both off.
Yeah. I'm aggravated that people had to gain that system, but I mean, we kind of knew it was going to happen. People are going to do what people do. They're going to jump on it. They're going to scavenge that.
So there is an argument, and we talked about it briefly before the show, that the government should not have handed any money out to anybody, and if they failed, they failed.
I don't agree with that argument.
I don't know that I do, for a different reason than you do. I love the idea that if a business fails, it fails on its own merits, or it makes it on its own merits. The only argument I have against that in this instance is the crisis was a mandate of government.
Yeah.
Is it mandated the shutdown that you can't open? So, you know what? If you walk up to the government and you say, you need to shut your doors, well, the government ought to reimburse you for that.
Yes. Agreed.
I do agree that that after that ended and you can open your doors again, it's on you to open your business and run your business.
Yeah. I can jive with that. I like that there's more options for small businesses, but at the same time, I kind of agree with you. I'm assuming that a big part of the reason to fund large numbers of small businesses and whatnot like that is to keep the economy from kind of imploding on itself. Because if there's nobody with any money, nobody's going to buy products or cycle products, make products from other products. And it would just make the economic crisis that is inevitably happening during and post-COVID that much harsher. I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I think that's a safe assumption. I don't know that I would agree with it wholly, as I think that a small business, if it's a good business and well run, it'll make money in good times or bad times.
Hmm.
If it's left up to its own options or devices. I think in this case, what hurt them is there's a guy on the door, knocked on the door and said, you have to close.
Yeah,
Like, oh shoot, how do I feed my family? Oh, we'll give
exactly.
you money. And I get that. I don't know. There is so much about this whole thing with the vaccinations and the incentives with the Dr. Fauci, the
Hmm.
like, don't even get me going on Dr. Fauci. Even if you like him, he's hard to like right now.
Hmm.
It is hard to trust the government.
Very.
And in Canada, when you look at the instructions to just ignore the fraud, like, seriously? Ignore the fraud?
See, I'm intrigued to see how it's going to progress because everyone who signed up for CERB, at least as far as I know, would have had to have given at least some identification, whether that be an SI. Like you say, you found an article where they didn't. I don't know anything about that.
I'm gonna
From
look
my
it up
own
here.
anecdotal experience, you had to give out that information to get your CERB payments. And so if somebody took a CERB payment they didn't deserve, the government's going to find out and they know exactly who did it. And so I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen next tax season.
Why?
If they're going to, if the CERB payments that you receive from the government are just going to be out of your tax returns, or if the government's going to come knocking on your door being like, hey, what'd you do with the money? Or what's going to happen there. I'm intrigued to see. Or if they're just going to let it lie. They're just going to be like, we pumped it back into the people who are going to pump it into the economy, and hopefully it circulates around.
So here's that article I found, Will, and I'll just. So this is early on in the pandemic. So this article was written in.
March 25th, 2021.
Yes.
So right when Canada got its major lockdowns.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that did happen, and because we didn't apply for it until I think June-ish. It was June or July, I believe.
Right. So you look at this, guys. So in order to get the cash out, the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, which is your version of the IRS, with oversight from Finance Canada, which is a government organization, it did not require that applicants provide social insurance numbers, nor did they obtain all relevant earnings or tax data. Well, how could you not assume there's going to be fraud take place?
It's gonna happen.
I mean, if I were to go on a rant, it would be you have to assume that there is going to be a subset of society who will take advantage of those rules.
Yeah. People are too opportunistic to not do that.
I'm going to lighten this up for just a moment. Here's a question from Brad. Here's Allison.
Welcome to the Will and Dave Show.
There's your answer, Brad. There's Allison. It is. These are the things that absolutely drive me crazy. Is we will look at these things, fraud that they know is happening, and say, we're not going to prosecute those things, and yet we throw a pastor in jail.
See, I don't know about not prosecuting. I know they didn't look for it when it happened, but I don't know about not prosecuting yet because,
well,
like
if they don't look for it, they can't prosecute it, right? So that's sort of an assumption.
Well, they didn't look for it when it was happening, is what we're seeing here. Is it wasn't being looked for while it was being handed out. But like I said, I think a vast majority of I suspect a vast majority of people who got CERB did have to give out a certain level of government information.
So this is the article. Is last month they reported they were instructed to ignore the possible cases of cheating.
Right, but I mean,
even though they were red flagged as possible,
yes,
they said to pay them. Well,
That's not to say they're not going to get tracked down later.
yeah, but how long? I mean,
Who knows?
it's a yeah.
And
These are the
I
things
touched,
that I look at and I go, you're going to leave the fraudsters alone, even though you're pretty sure they're doing shady stuff.
yeah. Part of me wonders how much of it is think of it like almost like an inverted stimulus check or stimulus package or stimulus plan to pump money into the economy rather than making some big bill. It's like we're going to give out all this money to all these different areas of people, avenues, and everything to try and get the economy going again. And more just like we're going to get out the CERB payments, and that way people can keep spending money to keep generating taxable purchases, to keep businesses running,
To
to
even
keep people
criminals.
happy, to even criminals, because criminals still spend money. They
Well,
still buy food. They still buy products.
If that's the role of
I don't
government,
know. I'm
it-
guessing.
if that's the role of your government, I think you
Rethink
should
things.
move to the U.S. or Jamaica or somewhere.
There we go. Not the U.S. Somewhere else, though.
See,
Tempting.
the difference is in between that and the IRS here in the U.S. is the IRS will throw you in jail before you even prove it guilty. They'll just throw you in jail and say you owe the money.
Yeah,
But
if the IRS ever gets to you. I mean, the IRS is such a tiny agency in the States now. It's, I don't want to say toothless, but it's tiny.
it gets to you. So I am going to bring this one up because it isn't really applicable to the conversation. But man, oh man, is this a topic of conversation? The open the border, even though Tim, BORDER. If you want to open the border, I'm moving in your basement.
Nice.
I am affected in this one as I really want to go visit my granddaughter, and it is almost impossible to do right now as I have to go up in quarantine for 2 weeks, and then I do my visiting, and then I have to come home. So I'm gone a month, and that is very hard to justify. And now, even if I get a vaccination, as of yesterday, I still have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and I'm not allowed in. And that is now it may change tomorrow or Monday rather. I don't know. Yeah, they're making an announcement on Monday for vaccinated people, and we'll see where that goes. But I will say that in the U.S. and in Canada, is there a dog in your neighborhood?
Yes, there is.
I hear that.
It's actually in the house.
Oh my gosh. So in the U.S. and in Canada, huge hit on the tourism industry. Huge hit.
Oh, yeah. Brutal.
And you would think that there would be an incentive. If we're going to incentivize folks to get vaccinated, we should be incentivizing. Incentivizing, is that the word?
Incentivizing.
If you're vaccinated, head over the border and come and give us your money. Like you would think that would be a good thing to do. Say if you're vaccinated, head on over. Except in the words of your prime minister, and in this he's right, but it's another argument about vaccinations. He said, even if you're vaccinated, you can carry the virus.
Mhm.
Well, if you're vaccinated, you can carry the virus, then
What's the point?
what's the point? But on the other hand of that, I don't know if you follow the governor of New York.
Not directly, no.
Okay, so Cuomo, the other day, they were asking him because he's opening up his state.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, so one of the reporters was asking, well, what happens when we go in one of the counties who are heavily vaccinated and the folks who are vaccinated are not interested in hanging around those who are not? And he made the statement, and it's so true. He said, if you're vaccinated, why are you worrying? It's the idiots who are not vaccinated who need to worry. And it's so true, but nobody says
Very
that.
true.
There's this whole argument that says you have to get vaccinated, and then we're going to separate the two sides in arenas, in stadiums, in things. We're going to separate them. Why?
I think
Except for the fact, as your prime minister so rightly pointed out, that you can still transmit the virus even though
Yes.
you've been vaccinated.
And I think it's, yeah. And yeah, the whole separation based on vaccine and not is, I think that's going to end up being a future topic as we see how things change and how they roll out. The talk of vaccine passports, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be something that I'm going to sit back and wait and learn how it's going to go down. There's lots of theories in the air right now, but not a lot of actual action happening.
So I got an article from Tim, sent it to me this morning, that for the Tonight Show, and there's a few other shows, if you have the AstraZeneca,
Mm-hmm.
you are not allowed in the show regardless,
Mm-hmm.
as it's not considered approved or whatnot. You have to have the Johnson & Johnson
Yeah,
or the
I
Pfizer.
can't remember what
Yeah.
I can't remember what prompted that, but that one's for legal reasons, obviously. Like the producers of the show are going to be like, we're not
Yeah.
risking it.
Yeah.
There's
So
not
there
a
they're
hope that we're going
saying
to chance it.
it isn't only the vaccine, it's only certain vaccines. Yeah, and this whole thing, we're going to give you money to get the vaccine, we're going to give you beer, we're going to give you a joint. But you know what? Even if you get that vaccine, the
It doesn't make
AstraZeneca,
everything better. It doesn't make it all go away.
you might not be able to make it into a ball game after all, depending on the whim of the owner of the ball team.
Mm-hmm.
Seems odd. Seems odd.
It's sus.
Sus.
It's pretty sus.
Well, Will, we have been almost an hour.
It's a good hour. Flew by.
It did. And once again, folks, we just really want to reiterate, this is not about the topics. It's not about the vaccine. It's not about the incentives. It's not about any of the things that we argue about. It's the fact that after we're through having the discussion, I still like that guy right there.
This guy.
That guy. I have to get my fingers pointing the right way.
But yeah, we disagreed on the majority of things we talked about today. I mean, there are parts that we agreed on, but the overall side which we stand on is pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Pretty opposing. But we can still have these conversations and we can still express ourselves without breaking the other person down.
So yesterday I was listening to a podcast, the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was having a couple on the show. They were talking, and he said something that was very interesting. Actually, I think it was one of the guests who said it. They did a poll early on in the election, or late on in the election, or it might have been after the election already. And they asked the Republicans, where is our greatest threat from?
Mm-hmm.
Number one is immigration.
Mm-hmm.
What was number two, Will?
I don't know. I've heard the question, but in a different context, not from the Joe Rogan.
The Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
Were number two. In the same poll, they polled a bunch of Democrats, and they said, what were the greatest threats to the U.S.? And I don't remember number one. Number two?
Republicans.
Were Trump supporters.
Or Trump supporters, yeah.
And,
okay. Yeah.
And that note scares the crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
That you're looking at your neighbor across the street or beside you or in the grocery store and saying, if you don't agree with me, you are a threat to this country.
Yeah.
That's
the
wrong.
Kind of division we just don't need.
Yeah. Absolutely do not need.
That's a good thing, though. Like, not a good thing, but I mean, that's a good question. And I want to ask you that. Like that's a great question to ask on the podcast. What do you think are the greatest? What's the biggest threat to the American way of life, or whatever you want to call it, Western society?
The Canadian way of life.
You're in America. I'll talk about Canada, but I mean they're going to be the same thing.
No,
Western society.
no. The greatest threat, the Canadian way of life, is if an American hockey team wins the Stanley Cup.
This is true. Riots, pillaging, looting, the whole 9 yards. It's over. You thought BLM was big.
Yeah,
Boy,
that's
howdy, we
right.
coming. Oh, Lord, we coming.
So ask your question again. I kind of hijacked your question,
what-
Will.
What do you think is the greatest threat to America in general, or to the Western world, America and Canada?
I like your answer, Tim.
A loss of freedom. That's a pretty
Loss
good
of
answer.
freedom. Yeah. So here's what we'd like you to do with that answer. Would you go onto our Facebook page and would you write a comment on the Facebook page?
Yeah, we'll
Or on the
throw the
YouTube
question
video,
up on
either one.
Facebook. Yeah, and we'll throw the question up
Yeah.
on Facebook as
Yeah.
well.
But interact with us a little bit and give us an answer online so we get those algorithms just a ticking.
And we're gonna do the spur of the moment. We're gonna do a call forward because we'll revisit this question next week.
Okay.
We'll give our answers next week, and we'll read over some of your answers next week if we get some, and we'll talk about them.
Sounds good to me.
Brilliant.
William, with that, why don't you end our show?
Everybody, stay safe and don't die.